There's a mall in the city that a lot of people like to visit, but not many know that before it was a shopping center, it was a cemetery. Some say the souls of the people buried there still linger in the walls, under the floors, in the shadows. I've never really thought much about that, until my friend had an experience that I'll never forget. It started when he had a school project about movie analysis. His task was to watch a film, take notes, and write about it. Since the Metropolis Mall was just a short walk from his house, he thought, why not kill two birds with one stone? He could watch a movie, finish his assignment, and get back home by midnight. He figured it would be an easy night, no hassle. The mall was bustling when he arrived, filled with the usual hum of shoppers, the clatter of food court trays, and the occasional laugh. He didn't think anything was strange. That was until he made his way toward the cinema. The closer he got, the quieter it seemed. The usual crowd wasn't there, and for some reason, the air felt heavier. He shrugged it off, blaming it on the late hour. The movie he was going to watch was one of those mindless comedies, the kind you don't have to think about. Just watch and laugh. He didn't mind. He just needed something to fill the time. It was already dark when he entered the theater, a few minutes before the last full show of the night. The lobby was empty. He couldn't see anyone else around. There was a strange silence in the air, like the entire mall had exhaled, leaving only him there. A slight chill ran down his spine, but he figured it was just the cold air from the AC. He walked into the cinema, and as he stepped in, he was momentarily confused. The theater was dim, but it was also oddly full. He looked around, trying to find a seat, but everyone seemed taken. He thought it was strange. How could it be so full at this late hour? It was a random comedy film after all, not a blockbuster. He glanced down at the seats, scanning for an empty one. He made his way down the row and found a seat near the front. Not ideal, but it would do. He settled in, feeling the soft scratch of the velvet seats beneath him and the buzzing energy of the crowd around him. He could hear laughter, the kind of deep, full laughter that made it seem like everyone was having a good time. The jokes, the slapstick humor, the silly antics of the actors. It was all working. People were clearly enjoying themselves. As the movie played on, my friend's discomfort slowly faded. The laughs from the crowd seemed reassuring. He wasn't alone in this dark theater. He was just like everyone else, watching a silly comedy, laughing at the dumb jokes, and relaxing for a couple of hours. But something felt off. Every now and then, he would glance to the side, thinking he saw someone standing near the back of the room, just barely visible in the dark. But when he blinked, the shape was gone. It wasn't enough to make him leave. The movie was funny, and the crowd's laughter kept him company. The film continued. The jokes became more absurd, but the laughter grew louder, more intense. It was strange. Some people were laughing so hard, their bodies shaking. The sound of it, the way the laughter bounced off the walls, made it feel almost unnatural. The sounds felt like they were getting louder, echoing in his head, mixing with the ticking of the clock on the wall. He looked up. It was almost midnight. The last full show of the night was almost over. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The laughter, though still funny at times, now started to feel more like a background noise than anything real. It was as if the laughter didn't belong to the people around him. It felt distant, alien, and slightly off-key. The longer he sat there, the more unsettling it became. But then he forced himself to focus on the screen, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. Finally, the movie ended. The screen went dark for a moment, and then the house lights flickered on. It wasn't a smooth transition, but more like a sudden snap. The bright white light filled the room, and for a second, my friend squinted, trying to adjust. As his eyes got used to the harsh brightness, he looked around. That's when the fear set in. There were barely 10 people in the theater. 10. He had thought the place was packed. But when the lights came up, he realized something horrible. Most of the seats had been empty, and the people who had been laughing, they were gone, vanished. The few who remained were scattered across the theater in strange positions. Some were hunched low in their seats, staring straight ahead. Others were unnervingly still, their eyes wide, frozen in a vacant stare, as if they hadn't even noticed the movie had ended. His heart began to race. He looked around at their faces, their stiff postures, and felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He didn't know why, but something in his gut told him this wasn't normal. The silence in the room was suffocating, and the eerie stillness made the air feel thick. The walls seemed to pulse, as though something was pressing in on him, something ancient, buried deep within the mall's foundations. My friend couldn't shake the feeling that the place, the people, everything was wrong. He stood up quickly, his legs trembling as he backed toward the exit. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. A figure, a shadow, crouching at the farthest corner of the theater. It didn't move, but it was there, watching him. He felt a coldness wash over him, a suffocating chill that reached deep into his bones. It was like the figure had been there all along, just waiting for the right moment. His feet were frozen to the ground. His pulse thudded in his ears. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't look away. But then, with a loud crack, the figure's head jerked toward him, its eyes wide, black as pitch. It wasn't a person. It was something else. Something old. And it wasn't supposed to be there. The sound of his own heartbeat drowned out the silence as he ran. He rushed out of the theater, stumbling, his legs like jelly beneath him. His mind raced as he pushed through the mall's hallways, his breath coming in sharp gasps. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Something was behind him, chasing him, and he could feel it in his very bones. But when he finally made it out into the parking lot, he stopped for a moment, gasping for air, and looked up at the mall's tall structure looming in the night. It was still and silent, but that only made it worse. The laughter from the movie, his last memory of the place, lingered in his mind. The laughter wasn't funny anymore. It was twisted, distorted. He never went back to the mall again. He avoided it, even though it was just a short walk from his house. His friends noticed how he changed after that night. He didn't talk about it much, just that it was weird and that he didn't want to go back. But deep down, we all knew it was more than just a weird feeling. There was something in that theater, in that mall, something he couldn't escape. And it was still there, in the silence, in the shadows, in the echoes of laughter that would never die. I haven't been to the mall either, but I sometimes wonder if it still calls to people, if it's still watching them, if they know, when they sit down for that last full show, what's really waiting for them when the lights come on. Because some places, they never really let go.